Hello everyone, it's SpawnPoiint and welcome back to another video. And today I'm going to be taking you on a short 380 mile road trip in my Tesla Model 3. So back in the summer I actually shared a 1,000 mile road trip where I covered how much it would cost, how long it took and how efficient it was to use my Model 3. And a few of you actually asked how that trip would compare to winter driving, where we know that the outside temperature does have a negative impact on the battery performance. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to show you how I prepped, planned and completed the trip, whether I used the heating, how efficient it was, how often I needed to charge, and how much it cost me both in money and time. Now this will be a real world test. Now with the tier system and lockdowns here in the UK, I haven't been able to complete a like for like 1,000 mile road trip, but I did manage to do 380 mile trip in one day. So just like last time, there's 4 of us completing this trip. You've got myself, my wife and my 2 children. And we've also got a boot full of Christmas presents as well, as the purpose for this trip was actually to deliver presents to our family further down the country. So the first thing I needed to do was plug the car in the night before, and I changed the maximum charge state to 100%. Now it was already set to about 200 miles or 70%, so charging for a few hours would be enough overnight. Now as I'm on the 5p evening rate, I've actually set my car to only charge between midnight and 4 AM, regardless of what time I actually plug it in. I also knew that I'll be leaving the next day at 8 AM, so I actually set the departure time to allow the car to preheat for about 30 minutes before I needed it. So the next morning the car was ready for 8 AM, I just needed to pack the car and unplug it from the charger. So I had about 291 miles of range. Now that's a lot lower than I saw in the summer when I was getting over 300, and a lot lower than what is predicted for the long range Model 3. So that's already about 30 to 40 miles less. The first thing that I needed to do was reset the trip, and I actually renamed it so I knew that I could use it for this trip, and I could use it for the whole of winter as well, and I can obviously look back on that in the future. So it's currently 5 degrees Celsius or 41 degrees Fahrenheit outside, and that gives you a rough idea really of what the temperature is that we'll be driving in today. The first destination on this trip will be Hopwood Supercharger, and that's just south of Birmingham, so it's about 140 miles from here. And it actually predicts I'll get there with about 36% battery remaining, and that's about 108 miles roughly. So plenty of range, and obviously I don't need to stop before I get to that first part of the journey. Heaters off and heated seats on. Now this won't last long as the windows in the car seem to steam up so often that you have to have the heaters on most of the time anyway. So it's now 8:30 AM and we're on the road. Now the first part of the journey is about 25 miles or so of country roads, which means that it won't be quite as efficient as it will be later on, but it will definitely average out. So I mentioned heating, and under strict testing conditions, you might have the heating off completely and just rely on the heated seats to save some energy. But I can tell you that at no point have I restricted myself with the heating. If it's cold or the windows start to steam up, I'll have the heating on. Also my children are in car seats, so that means that they don't benefit from the heated seats in the back. Now it wouldn't really be fair to stick them in hats and coats just to save a few minutes at a charger. Or would it? Okay, so first check, we are 2 miles in, the battery is currently 97% with an arrival battery of 34%, so that's dropped about 2% already. Now throughout the drive I'll be averaging about 70 miles an hour using autopilot most of the time, and I'll have the heated seats on and the heating set to about 23 degrees. So the temperature outside for most of the trip averages about 5 degrees Celsius. Okay, so we're about 50 miles in, and here's a quick look at how we're doing for efficiency and predictions. Okay, so we've averaged about 350 watt hours per mile. That's about 100 worse than in the summer. Battery is at 72% or 211 miles. And then we've now got a predicted arrival battery of 29%. So that's down quite a lot on the original 36%. So that means we'll arrive with about 87 miles instead of the original 108. And if you saw my summer road trip, well, the predictions were the opposite way. So I was arriving with 5 to 10% more range than originally predicted. So I'm using autopilot for most of the trip, and while using autopilot, it's not FSD. The car will follow the road, it'll steer, brake and accelerate. It'll stay in the lane that you're in, it won't try and overtake anything at all. But when you need to pass another car or you wish to pull out and overtake, you either need to disengage autopilot or indicate and then steer into the other lane. And then once you're ready, re-engage it and you're back on autopilot again. Obviously keeping your hand on the steering wheel at all times. Now, by documenting this short trip today, it might come across as being quite stressful or just requires way too much effort. But in reality, it's really straightforward. So far, I've unplugged the car from the charger, I've set the sat-nav up, and I've set off, that's it. And then every 50 miles or so, just for my own curiosity, I check the efficiency to see how well it's doing. And I used to do that in my petrol cars anyway. And being in the car is a lot of fun too. So it's got an awesome sound system, you've got autopilot, it's comfy, and it feels like a nice place to be. Okay, so we're now 100 miles in, it's showing 330 watt hours per mile, so a slight improvement on efficiency. Battery is at 49% or 143 miles, and arrival battery is showing 30% or about 90 miles, and the heating is off and it's only 6 degrees outside. So as we approach the first stop on our trip, the battery starts to precondition for the supercharger. Now this is actually a really important point to make. So if you know you're going to be using a supercharger, ensure that you select it from the map first. Don't just turn up and try and plug it in, because the battery does need a little bit of time to prepare. So yep, 10 miles out and it's starting to precondition already. Now it's also showing us a 33% battery with a 28% battery on arrival, so that's a good 8% or 24 miles difference to first planned. Now that might not seem a lot, but should we have needed to go a little bit further, we probably would have needed to have stopped here regardless just to charge it. Now the reason we chose this destination, Hopwood Supercharger, is it's only 5 miles from family that we wanted to see. It also meant that we could meet them, adhering to social distancing of course. We could also charge the car while we stood outside, so it was kind of a win-win, but definitely not something that we would usually do. So we pulled up with 28% battery, covering 141 miles with an average of 340 watts per mile. So taking that efficiency figure so far, that would give me a 100% range of about 220 miles under the current conditions. So I plugged it in, left it charging for about 35 minutes as we had a chat with family. Now this is only the first part of this journey today, and after this we will be leaving Hopwood and we'll be heading down to Gloucester, and that will be to meet more family that are travelling up from Bristol. So in total I charged for 35 minutes, I added 48 kilowatt hours or about 186 miles. The battery was now showing 270 miles or 90%. Now that would have cost me about £12 for this stop, but as I do get free supercharger miles, it cost me absolutely nothing. But I'm mentioning the price here for transparency. I'll also do a roundup of all the costs at the end of this video. So we're now 160 miles in total, or 20 miles into the second part of the journey. It's showing 333 watt hours per mile, so a slight improvement again. Battery is at 82% or 239 miles, and the arrival battery is showing 71% or 213 miles. So the heating and the seats have been on for most of the trip today. Again, no compromises at all. So as we arrived at the farm shop services, we are now northbound as we turn around. The battery was showing 65% or about 196 miles. So far today we have covered 195 miles and the watt hours per mile average is 332. So while we waited for my family to arrive for another short chat, I actually stuck Netflix on for my children to watch, and this is such an awesome thing to have in the car. And I also took the time to have a quick look around the car to see how dirty it was, and I actually don't think it looks too bad considering the weather and the distance that I've travelled today. And also I've actually received the free mud flats from Tesla, and that was just before Christmas, so I'll definitely be installing those later this month. So once we were finished seeing family and going for a short walk, we set home as the destination in the navigation. So it was about 185 miles home and the car was showing 196 miles on the range. But it still needed a stop at Hopwood services again for about a 15-minute top up. And that would then give us enough to get home, arriving with 16% or about 48 miles of range. Again, on the way back I used autopilot for a large amount of the journey. It definitely made driving that a little bit easier. So a quick stop at Hopwood services for a quick 20-minute charge, and while we waited we went to the toilet, we got a quick drink and the car was ready for us when we got back. So I added 29 kilowatt hours or about 115 miles, and that would have cost me about £7.25, but again it didn't actually cost me anything at all. So the way that you get free supercharger miles is either by using a referral code when you buy a Tesla and you will both get 1,000 free miles, or when somebody uses your referral code to buy their own Tesla, and again you both get 1,000 free miles. So at the moment I have about 200,000 miles to use on my account, and that's since I started recommending Tesla earlier last year. And now even if you do have free miles to use, while you're charging, you will still see a figure or a value appearing on screen, but don't worry, after a short while it will then reset to 0. Sometimes it takes a few hours, it's not instant. So the final leg of the journey starts now. We've got 230 miles of range to do 130 miles of road. Outside temperature is about 7 degrees, and we should arrive home with about 18% or 54 miles of range. And here's a quick look at the graph as well. Now over the next 135 miles, it's pretty much the same as the way down, so autopilot, 70 miles an hour, and the heating will be on. I didn't take much notice of the graph from here, as I knew that the range and the distance just wasn't an issue at all. Oh, and one thing to note is, obviously this was recorded prior to Christmas, and it means that I'm not showing the new update or the different UI. Now I actually really like the new user interface, I think it's really clean, but I know it's had a mixed reception, but I do like it. Apart from the gear indicator for drive and reverse, I do think that needs to be a little bit more obvious, maybe a colour change or something like that would help. So finally we've arrived home after about 10 hours in the car today. Battery was showing 47 miles or 15%, so again, pretty accurate, but still slightly worse than first predicted. A battery warning has also appeared on screen as soon as I turn the car off. So now in total we covered 383 miles today. We used 124 kilowatt hours with a watt hours per mile average of 322. So over the entire day the efficiency did improve slightly. Now using that 322 watt hours per mile, that will give me an average of about 232 miles on a full 100% charge. Comparing that to my summer road trip where I was getting 260 watt hours per mile over that 1,000 mile road trip, and I was getting about 288 miles on a full charge. So I've read that the average range loss over winter is about 25 to 35%, and that puts me at the lower end of that figure. So in summer I predict this same road trip that I've done today, it wouldn't have needed that second charge and I would easily have made it home. So as mentioned, the total distance was 383 miles and I spent 55 minutes charging today. 35 minutes of those was a planned stop anyway. But how much did it cost? Well, I charged at home first before I left, and as I'm with Octopus, I only pay 5 pence during the evening, so it would have cost me £3.75 for a 100% charge. Then the first charge stop, well, that would have cost me £12, and the second stop would have cost me £7.25. So in total, to cover the 383 miles today, it would have cost me £23. Now that is including superchargers, which is far more expensive than home charging. But as I mentioned, I don't pay for superchargers, so all in all, the trip today only cost me £3.75. So if you're in the UK and you wanted to swap to Octopus Go and be on the same tariff that I'm on, use my referral link in the description and we will both get £50 credit to our accounts. Now that's enough to fully charge your car 10 to 15 times, and that's basically for free. And you'll also get the evening energy rate of 5 pence over 4 hours. And in terms of advice for winter driving, definitely precondition and preheat the car. It's the best way to ensure the car is ready for your trip. Just remember to have the car plugged in when you do that. And try not to use the heating, but instead use the heated seats. I reckon if it wasn't for me using the heating, I might not have seen that 3 to 5% loss that I was getting on the graph. But as I mentioned, with 2 small children in the back, I couldn't really rely on just the seats, and plus the car was nice and warm for the entire trip. Also, don't forget to select a supercharger from the map if you plan on using one, so the car has time to precondition before you get to it. And use autopilot where you can, it will definitely help with the efficiency. So overall, the journey probably took me about 20 minutes longer than first planned, but it only cost me £3.75 in total, so not bad really. Now the only real planning and prep that I actually did in advance was plug the car in the night before and then set the departure time, so about 30 seconds of my time. I only spent 55 minutes charging in total, which was time spent either talking or eating or popping to the toilet, and on a 380 mile trip, a 55-minute stop would have been expected for us with children anyway. Well, I hope you enjoyed the trip and how winter efficiency does affect the battery, especially when compared to summer temperatures. And if you want to check out my summer road trip, if you've not seen it already, I actually drive from York down to Cornwall and back again. And if you want to check that out, you can see that next. And you've just made it to the end of this video, so thank you. And if you drop a winter Tesla in the comments, I'll give you a thumbs up as I know you've stayed till the end. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit that like button as it helps me out. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Until next time.